Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? Well, my name is Christopher Iannella. I will chair the hearing today. Good to see you, Mr. Kim. At this point, I know you have some distinguished folks here who want to speak, so we'll hear from your witnesses at this point. And if you can, oh, here it is, right here. The Honorable David Poole, Associate Justice of the Boston Municipal Court. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councilors.
Good to see you.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about Stephen. I first met him when Stephen was an assistant district attorney in what's now the Roxbury Division of the Boston Municipal Court. I was a defense lawyer at that time, and we had a lot of cases together. I got to know Stephen well, both in and out of the courtroom. Since that time, he's appeared in front of me pretty often as a lawyer in the 15 years I've been a judge. And I want to say a number of things, but among them, Stephen is an incredibly skilled lawyer. He's knowledgeable about law, procedure, he grasps complex legal issues quickly. He's got strong analytical abilities, and he also has excellent judgment. I've seen him make intelligent, thoughtful decisions under pressure many times. That's something, frankly, I struggle with every day as a judge. He's pretty good at it. And he also is a very empathetic person. He treats everybody with respect. He makes connections with people easily. He relates to people from a wide variety of backgrounds, including them backgrounds pretty different from his own. And for obvious reasons, I think those are really important qualities to have as a judge, certainly in the BMC and in my experience. I was impressed by Stephen's patience, his respect for other people. Right immediately when I got to know him first, at that time, as I said, he was an assistant district attorney in Roxbury Court. I worked in a law school clinical program where I supervised law students representing clients in criminal cases in Roxbury. And as you might imagine, dealing with law students as an ADA in a busy court like that can be kind of challenging. Takes a lot more time, takes a lot more effort. Law students don't always have the experience to sort of focus on what, if you will, the essential issues in a case are. And they also can be kind of vigorous in their representation just because of their enthusiasm. Sometimes that's off-putting understandably to DAs. Stephen was strikingly patient and respectful every time he interacted with one of my students. He listened to their legal arguments. He answered them, responded to them thoughtfully. He didn't brush them off. He never lost his patience, despite what was undoubtedly a heavy workload every day. And in the context of standing in, as I'm sure you could all envision, in a hallway outside of a courtroom where a judge, I'm sure somebody a lot less patient than myself, was, eagerly looking forward to getting through the day's cases. Stephen absolutely, good afternoon, Counselor. Stephen absolutely maintained his patience. He acted like those students were as important as any other lawyer, including himself. He didn't have to treat my students that way. In fact, in my experience, many ADAs quite understandably didn't. But he did that. And he did that because that's the way he treats everybody. He is simply a respectful and empathetic person. And I think that goes a long way in making a decent and thoughtful judge. Obviously, the nature of trial work is that people don't always just agree. In my experience, even if somebody, whether or not someone shares Stephen's legal view on a case, across the board, people appreciate and respect his integrity and his conscientiousness. He's a vigorous advocate for his clients, no question about it, but he doesn't take himself too seriously. And that humility he couples with a nice and a gentle sense of humor. He's got those kinds of attributes that I think are really important for a trial judge. And I don't mean so much intelligence, legal skills. I talked about that. He absolutely has those, no question at all. But he's got the personal attributes that I think on some level might be at least equally important, if not a bit more so. So I think Stephen will be a terrific BMC addition. I can't think of anyone better qualified or more suited to the position, and I hope to work with him as a colleague in the future. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you. I appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Councilor Devaney?
Thank you, Councilor. Going on 16 years.
I was here. My proud vote.
I remember.
No, I'm very proud. Yeah, you always made me feel proud.
You're very kind. Thank you very much.
So what do you think is the greatest attribute that he possesses that he's going to bring to the courts?
You know, a lot of attributes, I think, but I think maybe the basic and one that stands out to me is integrity. I think I mentioned, you know, across the board, judges, other lawyers, opposing counsel and otherwise, probation officers, everybody recognizes and knows about Steve's integrity. If he says something, that's what it is. He's a lawyer, obviously, and in that context, everybody lawyers. But at the same time, he has absolutely unquestioned integrity, and I think that really governs everything else he does.
Well, I have to tell you, and you're as a witness, because we haven't seen you.
He was desperate, so he had.
It's a pleasure.
It's all mine.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much. Good to see you, Judge. Thank you.
Well,
Next, we'll hear from Colonel Shannon L. McLaughlin, Judge Advocate, Military Division of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished counselors, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Stephen Kim. Stephen and I have known each other for quite some time, professionally and personally. So I will be talking a little bit about my personal observations of Stephen. I'm so honored to be before you today, and I'm honored to be able to speak on behalf of my dear friend, trusted and respected colleague, and fellow wartime veteran, Stephen Kim. I've known Stephen for 25 years. And the way we met was really by chance. We were in the first week of our 1L year at Boston College. It was 1999. And we both ended up at an orientation for an American Bar Association competition on negotiations. I sat there with every 1L, that was the auditorium that day, and we learned that this competition would go on for many weeks, single elimination rounds, until one team is left that would represent our school. And we also learned that we needed to be in teams of 2. I didn't know anybody. I looked over at this person next to me here who I had never met, and I said, "Do you have a partner?" And he looked at me and he said, "Well, no, do you want to be my partner?" And I wouldn't know it then, but asking that question to a total stranger would be one of the best decisions of my life. We joined a team, we worked hard. Every week we studied the scenarios, we practiced, we commit real time to it. And through that exercise, we got to know each other better and better. I was learning not only about Stephen as a friend, but I was learning about the character that Stephen has. Commitment, perseverance, and a negotiation style of doing his best to see things through all parties' eyes. Much to our shock, each week we won, until we were the last team standing at BC Law. We couldn't believe we made it that far. We then went to the Northeast Regionals. We won that, and we ended up finishing off the top 4 teams in the country that year. As we graduated law school, Stephen and I started private practice, and I saw firsthand his commitment to zealously representing his clients, his generosity, and his care. He loved taking the hard cases. One of the first cases we had together ended up going to trial. It was a complicated landlord-tenant matter where we were pro bono at Stephen's insistence. And that was at a time where we could not really afford to be pro bono. But we believed that a serious wrong had been committed against our client, and we were committed to seeing it through no matter what. Stephen is also a patriot, demonstrating duty and selfless service. And at the same time, he is an inclusive, open advocate, not afraid to stand up for the marginalized or different. And how do I know that? Because we served together for years as judge advocates in the Massachusetts Army National Guard, when policies in the Army would be considered by today's standards to be discriminatory and unfair to many. The events of 9/11 were the beginning of our 3L year. I was already in the reserves and got pulled out of law school and deployed overseas. Stephen volunteered at that time to enter the Massachusetts Army National Guard. He had so many other opportunities right in front of him, and yet he set those aside and volunteered to defend his country and his Commonwealth. In my 28 years of military service, I've seen a lot of different types of officers. And while all of them deserve praise for what they've sacrificed in order to protect our freedoms, Stephen wasn't just went in and punched the card. He was a different kind of officer. He was an officer who, within 2 months after getting married, volunteered to go to Afghanistan so that the other officers in our group who had children who had already deployed, so that they wouldn't have to go. Stephen Kim leaned forward and showed his dedication, putting himself in harm's way when he was nowhere near the top of the list to do so. As an Army officer, when he came back from deployment, when he was stateside, he was a zealous defender of soldiers that were being processed for separation at a time when many military members were back from deployment with the invisible wounds of war. And they had little or no supportive services to help them out. He even stood next to them, defended them, advocated, and gave them the opportunity to move forward in their lives with support, dignity, and grace. I served with Stephen, and unfortunately, I was serving in silence, forced to be closeted under the old don't ask, don't tell policy that some of you might remember. But in every other part of my life at the time, I was openly part of the LGBTQ community. In the first week of 2009, I was targeted under that policy. I was outed by someone that was in our unit with us. Stephen was there for me on every level. He was there as a fellow Army officer, supporting the difficulties of being outed in front of the entire command. He was there as a friend to remind me that I was worthy to serve our country, and that no matter what happened, he was an ally standing by me and reminding me that I should be proud of who I am. As an Army officer, Stephen just didn't help his friend. He mentored the officers that were junior to him and for his enlisted soldiers. He went out of his way to ensure that those coming up through the ranks were considered for promotion, received the awards that they deserved and earned. He didn't rest. He pushed forward in the pursuit of developing subordinates and rewarding their hard work. From that beginning of Do You Want a Partner, I've had a quarter century where I've seen Stephen and how he conducts himself in the day-to-day mundane when no one is looking, to opening up and running a private practice together, to serving as judge advocates in the Massachusetts National Guard, to serving in wartime and being the best of friends. I'm honored to be here to vouch for him, his character, his integrity, his abilities, his professionalism. I feel highly of this candidate before me, not only on a professional level, but on a personal level. But I would tell you that I've never had a brother. If I was lucky enough to have one, it'd be this gentleman sitting next to me. I thank you all so much for your time and allowing me to speak on behalf of Stephen Kim. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Councilor Devaney.
That was very heartfelt. I appreciate it. How many years have you been serving?
28.
I admit my ignorance, so tell me what a judge advocate is.
So we're basically lawyers for the military, and throughout our career, we serve in many different capacities. We might be trial defense, serving to represent soldiers who are having a difficult time staying in, who have gotten themselves in a bit of trouble. We also advise the command on legal matters. We'll run court martials, administrative separation hearings. We'll do legal assistance to help families when their loved ones deploy overseas and they need help.
So have you known this nominee how many years?
25.
Wow. Well, you picked the right one to be a witness. Tell me, how do you see his military service adding to his qualifications to be a judge?
Well, I think in military, like I had just mentioned, we have to go through. We have to learn quickly and on our feet. And and moving forward as he's on the bench and encountering new situations which he may not be exposed to in the past. I think it also shows dedication to the Commonwealth and what the position is that he's taking on. So Stephen's shown that he is dedicated to duty, and I think that will continue to come through his service on the bench.
Okay. Well, I thank you for your service. I come from a military family. My late husband was a Marine, my son was Army. Everyone in his family were Coast Guard or Navy, and his sister was in Vietnam. She was a lieutenant colonel. She was a flight nurse in the Air Force, and she had the most, how could I say it, the most wounded. And she was in all of the NA bombings in 2 years, but she saw a lot. We buried her at Bourne. She got the Bronze Star, very proud. So I'm sure your family's proud of you for all you've done too. And it's really a tribute for you to come and speak on his behalf. So in 25 years, how would you, how would you see him as a judge? What kind of attributes, what would you see him doing?
Well, the thing that comes to mind first, even, is empathy. And the ability for him to put himself in other people's shoes and see things from their point of view and understanding that. I think empathy and integrity are two of the strongest things that he will bring to the bench.
Right. Well, I can't thank you enough. That really, my pleasure.
Thank you very much, Councilor Ferrara.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much. In my 10 years here, that was one of the best speeches I've heard out of 275 nominees. And what you and the nominee have done for our country, we'll never be able to repay you. So I thank you so much for coming in, sharing your thoughts, and thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you. At this point, I want to introduce the other members of the council. To my right, Councilor Marilyn Petito Devaney, Councilor Joseph Ferrara. To my left, Councilor Tara Jacobs. Seated next to her, Paul DiPaolo, Terrence Kennedy, and Eileen Duff next to Mr. Kennedy. At this point, I want to read a letter dated March 20th, addressed to the council. Dear councilors, I'm pleased to nominate Stephen Kim to the position of Associate Justice of the Boston Municipal Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Sincerely, Maura Healey, Governor. At this point, is there anyone in opposition to the appointment of Stephen Kim? There being no one in opposition, we're going to hear from you, Mr. Kim. But just to let all the folks here know, at 1:30, give or take, the governor is going to come in because we have to swear in a member of the House. So we will suspend the hearing for a short period of time, so don't run away. So at this point, you can give your presentation. In the meantime, before that, you may want to introduce some family and friends.
Thank you, Councilor Iannella. My wife, Susan, my best friend, is here today, along with my daughter, Caroline. She's missing school and she's thrilled about it. Mother-in-law, Helena, who lives with us and raises all of us still. And my wife's uncle and aunt, who are here all the way from the Philippines visiting us. Also, Judge Poole and Colonel McLaughlin, my dear friend Matthew McDonough is here, who is the elected Register of Probate down in Plymouth County. However, he's here in his capacity as one of my best friends. We were roommates in law school together.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from you. You can sit back over there if you'd like.
First, I would like to thank God for the blessed life that I've had. And even before this nomination, I can honestly say that I am truly one of the luckiest people to have walked this earth. Born into a family that showered me and spoiled me with love, and to have raised me in the greatest nation on this earth. Been lucky to have met my life partner, Susan, best friend. I've also been blessed with a very fulfilling career. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the biggest blessing in my life has been the gift of being a girl dad. I'm thankful for my daughter Caroline, who is 8. She's here today and who sustains my hope that tomorrow's world will be better than yesterday's because of humans like her. You remind me every day that life has no meaning without love and that kindness matters. I'd like to thank Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll for having faith in me with this nomination, that I will exercise good judgment and be a staunch defender of the Constitution, work for fair treatment of all of those into the courts. My thanks to Paige Scott Reed, Chief Legal Counsel to the Governor, Sarah Kesselheim, Deputy Chief Legal Counsel, for their generosity and support through this entire process. My thanks to Valerie McCarthy and her staff at the Governor's Council for their tireless work behind the scenes to get us here today. Especially like to thank the following judges: Justices Gloria Tan, the Juvenile Court, Myung Jun of the District Court, Catherine Hom of the Superior Court, and Jason Chan of the District Court. Their encouragement and support. I would not have even applied for this seat if it weren't for them. I'd also like to give a special thanks for Justice Asha White of the District Court, and who I call Fab Five of Roxbury, Justices Kenneth Fiandaca, David Breen, David Weingarten, Deborah Del Vecchio, and Judge Poole, who have all been my role models for what makes a good judge for the last decade that I've practiced there. I would also like to thank my sisters, big sister Jennifer, Dr. Yu Jung Kim, both who have always protected me, their baby brother, from everyone else. But lastly, I would like to thank my parents and my maternal grandmother, because my story does not belong to me. It is more appropriately theirs. It is the story of a long journey, hopes of the 3 people who raised me from birth until my adulthood. My dad, Paul Jin Kim, my mother, Cecilia, both of whom are hopefully watching from their home in Plano, Texas, if they're able to maneuver their way through the web links. And perhaps the most influential person in my life, my maternal grandmother, Wan Boon Yi, whose spirit is here with me. I can feel her presence and her love shining down on me today. In 1976, I was born in Seoul, Korea, the youngest of 3 and the only boy. When I was 5 in 1981, my family moved to the United States. We first settled in Anchorage, Alaska. We began the first leg of our American journey as a broken family because of the immigration laws at the time didn't recognize my grandmother, who had raised me and my sisters from birth. The laws didn't recognize her as being a member of our household. It took her over a year to rejoin us, and she raised us until she passed when I was in college, having lived here until her death as an undocumented immigrant. I started kindergarten in Anchorage, and I remember learning how to speak English as a second language. Early childhood memories are filled with riding bicycles with my sisters and other children from the housing development that we lived in the Alaskan summers, late into the night, where the sun doesn't set until past bedtime, and digging snow tunnels in the winters, where the skies glow under the northern lights. After the 3rd grade, our immigration status changed. My dad found an employer who was actually willing to sponsor us to get a green card. That employer was in Dallas, Texas. So we uprooted from Anchorage and experienced our second culture shock, moving to a new country within a country. From the age of 9 until I graduated high school, I grew up in Dallas-Fort Worth parts of North Texas. And you can imagine that unlike today, where Korean pop culture is widely known and even celebrated, growing up in the 80s and the 90s in North Texas, and my skin had its challenges. I struggled to fit in, and I felt that I didn't belong at times, that my countrymen and my fellow Americans didn't fully see me as one of them. We faced prejudice, blatant ugly racism, demeaning treatment. Mom and Dad leaned into those stereotypes that this country had of Asians at the time. Although they knew nothing about dry cleaning, they became dry cleaners. My mom also worked in garment factories and sewed garments for nickels and dimes for every piece she sewed. We didn't have much growing up. A family of 6, having started out in a 2-bedroom apartment, wearing hand-me-downs, literally pinching pennies. By all measures, we were poor. But I never knew that growing up. because I was bubble wrapped with so much love. My parents instilled in me the importance of an honest day's work, and there is dignity in work. They taught me through their audacity to conquer the challenges of moving to a country where they didn't know the language, and showed us all that with hard work, faith, grit, and a little bit of luck, that dreams can come true. That within a generation, the son of a dry cleaner and garment worker could be nominated to sit as a judge in one of the most historic and important cities in this country. My story is one of love, but above all else, it is a story of hope and service. I was raised in the Roman Catholic faith, with an emphasis in my formative years to seek social justice and to think critically by the priests of the Catholic Order of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. They ran a all-boys college preparatory high school in Dallas, where our school motto was to be men for others, to live intentionally in the service of others. My Jesuit foundation is what brought me to Boston 30 years ago, to attend another Jesuit institution, Boston College. I studied English literature there and eventually went on to law school, but never forgot my Jesuit foundation, to live as a man for others. I started my legal career as an assistant district attorney in Boston, and doing that work came to realize in my early career that my values and life experiences were actually better suited to advocate for those on the other side of the aisle. I started a private practice, and my proudest professional achievements for the last 2 decades have come as a private bar advocate for the Committee for Public Counsel Services, representing indigent criminal defendants in the courts of the BMC, especially in Roxbury. My commitment to service and my patriotism led me to join the Massachusetts Army National Guard. I'm a proud veteran and served honorably on active duty in Afghanistan and risked my life for the values enshrined in the Constitution. I have lived my adult life by intentional design in the service of others, and with great reverence for the ideals and those yet unfulfilled promises of our country. The BMC is a very unique court where people who walk through those doors have struggled with poverty, discrimination, with trauma, and many other stresses. I believe that not only can I empathize with those individuals, but that I can connect with them on a personal level because I have walked in their shoes. I humbly ask for your vote and confirmation so that I may continue to work in service of our country and be a steward of the Constitution and assist with empathy those less fortunate.
Thank you. So I think we're going to continue, but remember now the governor's coming in. So we may quickly have to suspend. Councilor Duff.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations and thank you for applying. You do represent the American dream, as does your family, and thank all of you. It takes great courage and bravery to leave your country and go someplace else where you don't speak the language. I've had the opportunity to travel quite a bit and actually lived in South Asia for a while, and I didn't speak the language. And let me tell you, the kindness of other people in this world is really tremendous at times. So just quickly, the main things we spoke about yesterday. I already know the answer to the first one. As a member of the LGBTQ community, I'm very concerned about how the folks in that community, particularly our youth, are treated in the courts, particularly our transgender kids. I do understand it's a difficult issue for a lot of people to understand and wrap their head around. But when children feel safer living on the street than they do at home or in foster homes, we're doing, because this still is the United States. And often the reason we find them in the court system is because of they're homeless and they're committing crimes, which often will, turn into addiction or prostitution or whatever. So I just ask you, again, I know you have some experience working with this community, but to be very mindful of it. And, I feel very strongly that as elected officials, as attorneys and judges, we are and should be held to a different, higher standard. And it's our job to protect people. So I'm not even gonna ask you the question because I already did and now I'm just lecturing. The second thing is special people, what I call special people, people with special, if they're even physically disabled. The courts need to do a better job and they're trying to with the limited resources they have to make our courts more accessible, particularly impacts some of our veterans. Thank you for being a JAG. I'd like to see more JAGs in the court system. But do you have, I know you have experience working with veterans. Do you have experience dealing with any people that we may call special needs with developmental disabilities? Have you encountered them in your work or in the courthouse?
Counselor Duff, thank you. And I agree, I wholeheartedly agree with your statements. That were not the questions, but to your last question,
Pontificating.
I have worked with a lot of people with developmental challenges and issues on a regular basis in the courts. My practice consists, at least 50% of my practice is doing bar advocate work for CPCS. So I encounter people from all walks of life who come in through those doors into Roxbury Court, as well as BMC Central, where I take my cases. Just right now on my docket of 30 to 40 cases that I still carrying right now, I have 3 individuals who I know are legally incompetent to stand trial because of those exact same issues. And over the years, I've learned to, I'm not a psychologist. I don't claim to be even remotely close to having the expertise of those professionals. But when I meet and encounter a new client, the first thing I try to gauge is whether there needs to be an evaluation done. Because do they understand what they're even facing as a criminal?
And often, folks can present to us and we don't know there's a challenge.
Oh, absolutely.
And so for you as a lawyer, you've learned how to do that. So the challenge is transferring it to when you're on the bench and you're in a pressure cooker, right? Because you're gonna be in BMC and that's a big deal, right, in and of itself. So thank you for that. Again, I always say it does not absolve someone of a crime if they does, however, impact how they are treated and sentenced, because they do need to be safe. Even if you're in custody, you need to be safe. And you know what? I'm going to leave it at that because I already know the answers to the questions and I don't need to listen to myself talk anymore.
Thank you very much. Councilor Kennedy.
First of all, I want to thank you and Attorney McLaughlin for your service to our country. It's so important that people recognize that. I don't have any questions for you because I've known you for a very long time. One of the advantages I have as somebody who's in and out of the courts every day, as Judge Poole knows, I try to stay away from Roxbury because I send Getterman there to aggravate the judges. But I've seen you over the years. I know what a terrific lawyer you are. I've seen the compassion that you have for people. I just want to say that your family, especially your daughter, should be extremely proud of you today. This is an incredible accomplishment that you're sitting here before this council, and you should be proud of yourself. Amen.
Thank you. Councilor Jacobs.
Good to see you. We didn't get a chance to meet in person because weather changed our plans, but I'm glad we changed those plans because it was a very slippery day. But I did enjoy speaking with you, and we discussed a number of things that really highlighted who you are, how you think, and how you approach people, but also law. I don't really have a ton of questions for you today. I think I'll give you an opportunity to share some of what we discussed earlier in terms of court culture and respect. I think we had a conversation around that resonated with me, and so I think it's worth allowing you the floor just to share about to give a sense of who you are and how you will sit the bench.
I think what you're hitting on is probably when I talked to you about being conscientious that people who walk into court who don't actually work there on a day-to-day basis, people who are not the lawyers, the prosecutors, the probation officers, the judges, the court officers, and the administrative staff. And for them and for all of us, it's where we work. So we get desensitized over time to the very real fact that for a lot of people, the general public, whether they're a defendant, whether they're a witness, whether they're a victim, when they walk into court, it's a traumatic experience. It could be one of the worst days in their lives, or at least one of the more stressful days in their lives. And it doesn't take much effort to help them stay calm, to relax those jitters, just by being kind and slowing things down. And so I think my approach, should I be lucky enough to be confirmed as a judge, would be to set that tone in my courtroom. When I walk on the bench, the one thing that even the lawyers don't have to worry about is the unknown factor of, is this judge going to create more stress and friction in the courtroom for not just the lawyers, but the litigants, and the opposite. I would be the judge who makes sure, one, that everyone is respectful, but also be mindful and empathetic to the very real stresses that people are undergoing when they're in the court, because we don't know what is going on in someone's life. Nobody does.
So I appreciate, you're articulating in a way that just confirms for me the feelings that I had the first time we had this conversation. And I think I alluded to this when we talked, but I've been sitting down with different groups of court impacted, but also advocates, witness, victim advocates, who work in the DA's office regularly, who've shared so many disheartening stories about the re-traumatizing effect court can have with judges who are not respectful or sensitive to the traumas and abuses and violence. And where for some of them, they're going to certain judges' courtrooms, they prep their whether it be defendant or victims, to be prepared for what they're going to experience in the court of just, this is how this judge is, deal with it, but be prepared for it, because they know the likelihood is they're going to have a less than respectful and potentially just very almost violent language about the experiences they've had. And it's disheartening to hear that goes on. And going forward, I'd love to see all the judges that we do confirm through this chamber be of a different caliber. And I think you're the way you think and talk about how you want to be as a judge is exactly what to see, and I think goes a long way towards ameliorating some of that court-based trauma, which it's always going to be someone's hardest day. It's never going to be a happy experience, but it doesn't have to be a violent experience. So I just want to say thank you for that, and
Thank you very much, Councilor Joseph Ferreira.
Thank you. I appreciate all the time we spent together chatting on the phone. We have some big supporters who are friends of mine and people I respect their opinion. One is the counsel to my left, Iannella, big supporter of yours. And the other one is your law school undergrad classmate, Matt McDonough, the Register of Probate, who called me and spoke like wonderful things about you for a very long time. So with that, I know the governor's about ready to walk in. I don't have any questions for you. I think you're going to make a great judge. And again, I want to thank you for your service to the Commonwealth and to our nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to break 10, 15 minutes. We'll get you afterwards. The governor's coming in momentarily. You can wait out there. You can stay here. It's up to you. Anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. We'll resume.
Are you ready, bro?
Yes. Thank you very much.
I have one more comment.
Counselor Terrence Kennedy, make it quick, please.
I neglected to mention how fast Council Iannella was on the phone with you.
That's true.
And he put it on so quickly because he wanted to get you on board right away.
Okay, thank you, sir. Counselor Paul DiPaolo.
Thank you, Counselor. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. First off, thank you for your service and for your witness, Colonel, your service and your love to country, even acknowledging things that you work on to improve. And I'm very grateful. I wanted to ask a couple of things. In your application, you talk about crafting dispositions and finding creative ways. You wrote about working to craft careful dispositions that would meaningfully impact recidivism. And I was wondering if you could expand either what you've seen done that you consider creative or what you can imagine done you consider creative that would play some small role in reducing recidivism.
I've seen in my work some very creative things done by individual judges, not necessarily like system-wide.
Sure.
I have seen plenty of my clients, especially in Roxbury, with the really thoughtful judges in Roxbury, I think more so than in any of the other courts in the Commonwealth. Take care to ensure that individuals with, for example, drug dependency issues, opioid addictions, even those types of charges that are not possessory offenses, a lot of them are directly related or indirectly related to addiction and addiction issues. And so for people who come through those doors who are in the throes of addiction, I've seen judges craft dispositions that will allow these folks to enter, when available, detox and treatment, and use that as leverage to make sure that they get the care that they need. But also, if they successfully complete those types of programs, it goes a long way in crafting a positive disposition that those defendants could live with, such as rewarding them at the end of a probationary period if you successfully complete an entire 3-step treatment program that incentivizes them to have perhaps a case dismissed.
And is that, I mean, is the prelude to that kind of a individualized, tailored conditions when conditions are being set?
Absolutely.
Around the procedure, but.
I think that dispositions of any case need to take into account someone's station in life.
Is it, from what I hear, sometimes there isn't a bed or there isn't an option to send someone. And as a practitioner, is that your experience as well?
It is.
And so what's what to do in that situation as a judge?
The harsh reality is that in the Commonwealth, there are not enough beds available for treatment. And a lot of times the courts resort to the sheriff's department to house people while they're waiting for beds. And I think to alleviate that, some sheriff's departments have actually started those types of programs even within the jails.
Yes.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think it's important to acknowledge the difficulty, even when we have the best of intentions. And earlier this morning, we had a parole board hearing and it was brought up, someone serving in one institution versus another. What if they have access to different programming when they come up for parole and this person didn't have access? And I think of it in an analogous way to which county house of correction you may find yourself in the situation you just described. Because I'm not a criminal attorney, but from what I understand, some county houses of correction are very proactive about providing the medical treatment that folks dealing with substance abuse or addiction or withdrawal are going through, and some aren't. So, but I appreciate your acknowledgement of the challenge. We all hope that we can do better on that. As far as your demeanor, your temperament as a judge, and we've heard this morning, and I've read your application. I feel like you have you've spoken of your sensitivity and empathy for folks on their difficult day in court. What would be the standard for you to hold someone, legal standard? In your head, what would cause you to hold someone in contempt of court?
In the military, there's a saying, you salute the uniform, not the man. And so there is a certain amount of decorum and respect that you are supposed to give to, say, an officer of that caliber. Say, if I were a captain and my senior officer is a colonel, but I know that colonel is not a good person, right? On a personal level. But in a professional setting, you still have to salute that person and to give respect to the uniform. The same thing, I think, in the courtroom. There are many judges that over the years I have interacted with, some who I respect highly, like Judge Poole. And there's been a few that not as much.
I wasn't on the council then, so.
However, in the courtroom, it is a deliberative process, and there is a certain amount of decorum that you expect of anyone in the court. And so just because you don't like a judge doesn't mean you can be disrespectful. And I've seen that in the courtroom as well. I think if you take it to an extreme, and someone is really making a mockery of the system, then that is at a time when it's appropriate to consider holding someone in contempt.
That would be an extreme situation.
Yes.
Have you seen such a situation in your time as a practitioner?
Once when I was a prosecutor, I actually saw a litigant spit on a judge on the bench.
Okay.
And I think that would be an example.
That meets your level of, for a counsel to spit. Okay, yes. That seems reasonable. I want to ask you, what do you think about GPS as a condition?
I think it's a tool that the court system uses.
I agree.
And sometimes I believe that because we don't have the resources in the court system to truly supervise someone, that a lot of times it's the easy thing to fall back on.
That's how a lot of defense lawyers describe it to me as well.
But it's also used in order to monitor people who should be monitored.
It has a purpose for sure.
It does have a law enforcement purpose.
When you think of it, what's the primary law enforcement purpose, or what would be the thing that you're like, oh, GPS?
I think in cases where there is a victim in a case, that is where their safety is truly a concern. That is an example of when GPS monitoring would be appropriate in order to ensure the safety of, say, a witness.
And am I correctly inferring from what you said before? Sometimes there's an over-reliance on it that maybe we should check ourselves about.
I think that's fair.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Counselor Marilyn Petito Devaney.
I really enjoyed meeting you, and I'll tag you with me. I'm going to ask you now, you were born in Seoul, but you went to school here? What school did you go to here when you were a child?
So I was raised primarily in the suburbs of North Texas. But after high school, I came up to Boston 30 years ago at Boston College. So I went to BC for my undergraduate studies, my graduate studies, and law school.
With the high school?
The high school, I went to a high school called Jesuit College Prep of Dallas.
Were they priests that were the teachers? Or how did?
There were priests that were, it was run by the Jesuits.
Jesuits, wow. And that was strict, was it strict?
It was stricter than public school.
I suppose. So how many cases would you say you've had?
In my entire career, if you mean how many cases have I touched or handled, I would say it's somewhere between probably 1,500 and 2,000.
Good deal. That's great. You had some serious cases. Can you tell us about that? Because we don't hear those kind of cases yet.
I've had some interesting cases in my military career. I would say probably the most interesting ones.
So serious. Yeah.
The most serious ones probably are ones where were during my deployment to Afghanistan. I for a time represented the United States in international tribunal hearings advocating for the detainment of enemy combatants that were basically, in layman's terms, prisoners of war. We don't use that term in Afghanistan because we were not there fighting another nation. So these were either insurgents or terrorists that were or accused terrorists that would have been swept up by our forces, by the NATO forces. And because we are one of the most civilized countries in the world, we afford even those that we capture certain legal rights and review processes. And so our government would afford these enemy combatants their day in court to determine whether they should be released or further detained. And I would say that was my most serious type of cases that I saw when I was a military attorney.
Well, I served for 22 years on the Commission on Disabilities, and I am especially glad that you have a background. And I'm glad that you went through it because you had post-traumatic stress, which must have been terrible. But I know when someone comes before you, you'll identify with them because whatever their disability is, you've gone through it, you've walked in their shoes. Do you see that as a strength on the bench for you to talk to people with disabilities?
Yes, Counselor. I think when I was going through it personally on my own, I didn't see that it would be an asset later on in life. But and since I'm fortunate to be here before you all, should I be fortunate enough to get your vote and confirmed as a judge, I think it would really serve me well because PTSD isn't just something that you experience in war, but I have clients and victims in cases that I've represented in the courts in Boston who suffer from post-traumatic stress, whether they've been traumatized as a victim in crimes, or whether they were traumatized as a child, or whether they're traumatized even on a daily basis in their lives as they live their lives in the city.
Right. And I thank you for your service. That's remarkable. And for people that don't know, it was after 9/11 and you felt you wanted to serve our country. And I thank you for that. Tell me, we certainly haven't won the war on drugs. What do you see in your 20 years experience, your cases that you've had? Is it increasing because it's drug related?
It's definitely increased in the last 10 years. I don't know if it's seeing or if it's pretty much just as bad as it can be. I think it's gotten about as worse as it can be in the last decade, definitely because of the opioid crisis that we've experienced in the Commonwealth as well as the rest of the country. There are other drugs that have really ravaged other parts of the country that luckily, things like crystal meth that I haven't seen as much in the city. Most of my practice has been in the city of Boston. I've heard from other attorneys that those other drugs, they're seeing a pickup in other parts of the state. But the opioid crisis it's touched every community in the Commonwealth.
Well, I'm pleased that they have the specialty courts that they've added, the veterans and the drug courts. What do you see in how have they helped?
I've been involved in at least 3 veterans courts in my career in various counties. I know in Suffolk County, we have one in the BMC, actually. There's a few of the outlying suburbs as well. Depending on the wraparound services that are more accessible to veterans, I've seen a lot of success. I've had clients who are war veterans who their direct involvement in the criminal justice system is 100% a result of their trauma that they experienced during their deployments. And for them, it's a lifeline.
And you've got quite a few awards, haven't you, through the years, and which I think is outstanding. Do you want to tell us about some of them that you have? I know it's hard to talk, but this is your day.
I guess technically I am a decorated war veteran. So
That's a lot, and we thank you.
I've received the Army Commendation Medal. I've received the Global War on Terrorism Medal, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, I'm leaving out several others, but it's been an honor to serve, and I have received my appropriate awards for those services.
What was we talked about cases that you've had, and you've had complicated cases. And that, do you want to tell us about, just choose one that comes to mind that, but I know that, they're not always successful, and I suppose that stays in your mind, but what is the most rewarding one through the years?
The most rewarding ones through the years, I can tell you, have been ones where I've defended young people, young adults. I can think of one that comes to mind, a young man who was an immigrant from Haiti, came to the US later on in his teenage years with his mother, and was learning English for the first time in high school, and was being teased and picked on because of it from other students. And an incident happened at school where he got charged with a very serious assault type of charge, and it was rewarding to defend him, take it all the way to trial, to beat the case, and to allow him not to get a conviction that would have led to him to be categorized as someone who is going to be deportable.
So what do you see going to a municipal court rather than a district court? What is the difference for you going to that court with your experience?
Counselor, the difference for me is that would be in the city of Boston. It's the city that I love. It's the reason why as you know, I didn't grow up here, but I've consciously decided to put down my roots in the Boston area. And that's because I love the city of Boston, and I love working in the city of Boston. I love defending my clients who come from the pool of the population, of an urban population, people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, who come from immigrant backgrounds, from all walks of life, that I think makes it unique, more unique than want to disparage any department of the district court, but I would much rather be in Boston.
Well, I'm going to ask you something that I believe. Do you believe in racial discrimination in the Massachusetts courts?
Of course.
And so, and how do we change it? I mean, I go out to prisons and I meet with Black men who have been wrongly sentenced. And my goal is to identify those who deserve release, because there is prejudice. And some get life without parole, they're not warranted. So how do you see it can be changed? How can we change that mentality? I mean, someone could sit here and tell me oh yeah, there is, but what do they do about it? We don't have a crystal ball. We don't have a crystal ball, and people don't know that as a governor's council. So we can have someone there that's as pure as Mother Teresa saying he's gonna be, wonderful to everybody. But then we hear these things when I go out to the prisons and I see how destructive, the courts are. So, how do we change it? How do we change that mentality?
I don't know, I can only speak for myself, but I believe that it starts by looking in the mirror and acknowledging our own biases and be willing to confront those. And I also believe that we could change it one judge, one prosecutor at a time, where the judiciary, as well as the rest of the court system, if it looked a lot more like the people who come through those doors as litigants or as victims and witnesses, I think that would go a long way.
Well, thank you. You've had a long day, and I thank you for the time that you put in when you came out and met with me, and the time you're taking now. And I wish you all the luck. It's so concerning. Really unique, a unique, and I can't even say all of it put all together, your military, and all the occasions, and the ability, and passion, and you put that all together. You couldn't ask for a better judge. So I'm wishing you all good luck.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you very much. I don't have any questions, Stephen. We had a lengthy conversation, you and I. I was impressed with your witnesses today. They did a great job, both of them. Your educational experience is fantastic. I went to Boston College as well. No, but I think I see your humility, your compassion. I think you're a great addition to the Boston Municipal Court. And when your name comes before the council, I'll be more than happy to support you. Thank you. Thank you all for coming in, being so patient. And that will conclude the hearing. Thank you, everybody.